Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. Robert J. Wolfe. He's a neuroradiologist, award winning author, and the son of two Holocaust survivors whose courage and resilience continue to inspire generations today. His book, Not a Real Enemy: The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom, tells the extraordinary story of his father, Erwin Wolfe, who defied Nazis, escaped forced labor camps twice, and later fled communist Hungary under the cover of night to find freedom in the West. The book has received multiple national awards, including the Nautilus Book Award, the National Indie Excellence Award, and the Reader's Favorite Book Award. And it stands as both a historical record and a deeply personal journey. Robert, welcome to the show. It's a privilege to have you here to help us preserve and reflect on your family's remarkable story.
It's a privilege to be here. I'm very honored you invited me, and thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Robert. It's very great to have you.
Thank you, Pastor Paul. Appreciate it.
So, Dr. Wolfe, you've appeared on multiple podcast interviews promoting the work of this book that you put together, which is really like family history and letters and an autobiography from your father. I wanted to ask you, before we get into the details of it, how did your parents' history actually shape your worldview?
Well, I'll give you a brief history of the book. My mom and dad, like you said, they wrote the autobiography about my dad's life in the 70s once they finally got settled in the United States. This is in the 70s. They went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer, ultimately to a disc, if you can believe that. They were crisp. The stories were crisp. They wrote the stories as though they had happened the previous day. The sounds, the smells, the fear, the cold, the loneliness. You could feel it all. The way the table was set, listening to the radio, it was amazing how they recorded what happened in my dad's life, going back to his childhood and even his father's life. A captain on a ship in World War I. He was a captain on a Red Cross ship. Flash forward 1997, my dad passed away. He was my idol of growing up, but that's because he was a doctor and he loved medicine, and that's why I became a doctor. Since ninth grade, it's all I wanted to do. But that was before I knew everything that they went through in Hungary. And so maybe 30 years ago, I read the manuscript, didn't think much of it. But then except my dad's first escape, I kind of remembered that. And things that when we had family arguments, they would bring up topics like forced labor camp and how good we have it as Americans, and come back to that later. But 1997, my dad passes away. Unfortunately, 2016, my mom passes away. A historian friend hands me the disc now of the story, and I didn't think much of it at the time. Had to take care of my mom's affairs, retired for a year, and then went back to work to help a friend. They were short radiologists, so as radiologists, our left screen is the patient queue, the list, and the right screen are the images between cases. And so now this disc is calling to me like Superman's kryptonite. I know that's kind of corny, but literally summoned me. It called out to me. So between cases, I started reading the book again, the story, and I couldn't leave it on. It was so amazing. 20 miracles, 4 escapes, remarkable. If you didn't believe in God before reading the book, you sure did afterwards. Profoundly changed my life, realizing how important the subject matter was, anti-Semitism in the backdrop throughout. And I just couldn't leave it on a disc. I couldn't leave it on a computer. I needed to share it. And so it was a big life changer for me back in 2018. The book's from there, there's a lot of twists and turns, just getting the book published, getting it out. Almost self-published, but bottom of the ninth, shoestring catch, got my co-author Janice Harper, who did a remarkable job helping me turn the autobiography to a biography. And then we queried agents and publishers. We vetted them out very carefully. And bottom of the ninth, shoestring catch, we got Amsterdam Publishers. It was our last pick. And we were fortunate. They loved the book, and we signed the contract. And the next day, 6 months later, the book was put out, almost to the year to the date with the Hamas attacks, October 7th, just plus or minus a few days. I was in Israel at the time, so that was really exciting. I was in Israel. The book was being released, and my parents wrote this as though they knew I would do this. And don't you hate it when your parents are right? I shouldn't say that in front of your dad, but that, and they knew that anti-Semitism would be a recurrent theme. It would be, who knew that it would break out? Like, it wasn't like this in 2018 when I started this, and now it's the story is as relevant as ever, even though the events happened 60, 80, 100 years ago.
Robert, it's amazing when you say that. I've been to Israel 11 times, getting ready to take another tour of 100 people next year. I was there during what they called the knife intifada. I was there in 1996 when a bus bomb killed 27 people just down the street from my hotel. It shook the entire hotel, and they told us, "Don't worry, that's the sound of our sonic booms, of our great jets." But so I love the land of Israel. I love the Jewish people. I love what they've done and their incredible survival and their incredible tenacity. And you're right. Your parents were right. They knew this wouldn't go away. They know it will never go away, no matter how hard we try to educate people. So I want to ask you about your father's experience. I mean, in a forced labor camps where I think your grandparents were killed. Can you help us, take us to that period? Grandparents are getting, I guess, off a train. Maybe they were sent there. Where do you want to pick this up? But your father's incredible experience.
Well, we'll start. My parents. Okay, so my dad's parents perished at Auschwitz, 1944. They did this mass exodus, this mass corralling of the Hungarian Jews, 43 and especially 44. It was the fastest deportation and genocide in World War II during the Holocaust. So every time the Nazis seemed to be losing the war, and this happened in 42, they would do this. They would accelerate systematically the murder and the persecution of the Jewish people. Hungary was occupied before that, but the activity against the Jews really didn't take place specifically until 43, 44, even though anti-Semitism was around since the mid to late 30s. Newspapers. Today we have the internet. Back then they had newspapers. They had the Arrow Cross running things. Arrow Cross were where the Hungarian government and the Arrow Cross were more anti-Semitic than the Nazis themselves. If you can believe it, at least according to my dad and his friends. So 43, late 43, my dad's taken away to a forced labor camp. You're right. The middle of nowhere. They did lots of marches. Any one of them could have been a death march, which a lot of people don't know about death marches. We know about them in the Far East, in the Pacific, but not so much in Hungary or Europe. But they occurred. Only 5% of forced laborers survived, and most of them that were around that were discovered were treated as prisoners of war. My dad was still in hiding and on the run, so he wasn't subjected to that. But yeah, he was in the middle of nowhere in 43, and they had to dig ditches. They got beaten. They got urinated on. They had to walk sometimes hours just to get food, hours just to get faulty equipment, meaningless tasks they had to do if there was nothing for them to do. But they had to fill landmines. They had to defuse landmines. They dug ditches. They built airport runways, and sometimes they were attacked by Soviets. They had Soviet airplanes trying to gun them down, and they were unarmed. The Jewish people were considered inferior. They're called paramilitary and considered inferior to fight for the Hungarian army. So they were put into forced labor camps. Eventually, he escapes with his friend Frank, and it's a great story. It's an unbelievable story. In the middle of nowhere, not knowing where they're going to go. We talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel here. You've escaped the guards temporarily, but you don't know where your next meal's coming from. You don't know where you're going to be sleeping, whether you're going to get a job again, whether you should take off those ridiculous yellow bands that they had to wear and those stupid hats. But they did. They made it. They made it to Budapest. And then they escaped again soon after because they had some protection. They met a lot of nice people that kind of protected them. But then when they were out in the open and a truck driver offers to give them a ride to where they needed to go, and he double crosses them. He takes them to what they call the dog pound in downtown Budapest, across the street from Nazi headquarters. And a few days later, they escaped again. It was just unbelievable split-second timing. Lucky to be around. My dad was lucky to be around. And then, of course, they had two other escapes under communist Hungary. And that's that. Of course, the Russians liberated Hungary. If the Americans had, it's another good point. I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be born and raised in Hungary. And if lucky enough, I would have gone to medical school in Hungary. So, but it's not the way it worked out. The communists took over. They were not much better to the Jewish people, apart from corralling them into town squares and centers and hauling them off in trains under the guise that they would be doing. What did they tell them? They would be doing forestry work and landscaping and making properties nicer, things like that. And little did they know, no, it went right to Auschwitz. And my dad finds out months later what happened to his parents. Both perished at 50, and That was a miracle too. Just the way he found an eyewitness at Auschwitz who told him what had happened. Many miracles. So and then two more escapes, of course. Once when my dad was finally a medical student, decided he'd had it with communism, and then finally after the Hungarian Revolution in '56, mom and dad were both frontliners. Mom was in med school at the time, ran the blood bank. Dad doubled down as a trauma surgeon in '56 in the Hungarian Revolution. 3,000 people died in that war, thousands of refugees and homeless and countless destruction. Just a 2-week war, but they had enough. '56 and just decided let's go. So that was my dad's fourth escape. Another miracle, just slipping in. My dad missed an escape under communist Hungary. He went to the wrong train station. This guy was going to arrange in my dad's escape, and he felt like the unluckiest guy in the world. But everybody who made that train got arrested, including his medical school roommate. So the luck on this guy, as the Sopranos would say, it was just unbelievable. So he misses an escape, but that went in his favor, And then and just escaping at all 4 times. I mean, you got to be kidding me. You put yourself in my dad's place, and I think, how could I do that?
How old was your dad during this time? 1943, when he was first sent to the death.
He was only 21 years old. He was 21 years old.
Yeah.
And the bullies in his class were there for a year ahead of him. The bullies, the people that were a year older, were already there. And he thought, oh boy, here it comes. They were tough enough in high school and whatever. Even though my dad's father gave them, the poor in his town, free dental treatment and things like that. But it turns out they were in the same boat, so they were friendly to my dad and his friends. They were actually on the same team, which was hard to believe. So, whereas the Orthodox people, not so much. They kind of shunned the non-Orthodox prisoners. So that was a little strange to me, but strange to my dad because they were on the same boat.
That's interesting. So the Jewish people, of course, the Orthodox Jews were very religious and very focused on what they do. I won't call them non-believing, but just say non-practicing Jews. I would think that they're in a war, in a situation of genocide going on, that there wouldn't be any more division between everybody be on the same team. But you're telling me is that it still wasn't?
Yeah, and that's what happened to my dad as a kid too. His parents had to move a few times because of financial distress and not fitting into the right neighborhood with the Orthodox or otherwise. I'd say they're more reformed, conservative. I mean, they did practice religion, but of course
Right.
you weren't allowed to, And I don't know how these guys kept kosher because they were starving. So basically, you ate whatever was around, So, and my dad had the integrity. He was in charge of dividing the food up because there was so little of it, and these guys were starving and they wanted to eat more and more every day. But my dad said, "Look, we need to keep the supply going," and they elected him to do it because of his integrity.
Yeah.
And his fellow mates also showed integrity. They really had to survive. They had to depend on each other to do the right thing. So lots of amazing stories, lots of twists and turns for sure.
Yeah, and Robert, I would say that it is indeed an absolute miracle that that you're here today, still, especially with the multiple escape, like the luck. I mean, I wouldn't say it's either luck or fate or God was watching over your father, but
The hand of God. If you didn't believe in God before reading this book, you will afterwards. It was enlightening. I mean, this you got to believe that the hand of God was in his favor. Like my dad's name was Moses. I was going to call the book the sixth book of Moses. The Old Testament, because all the miracles in it. My dad's name is Moshe or Moshe ben Yosef, Moses son of Joseph. And but my my co-author came up with the Not a Real Enemy title, and for good reason.
And so I wanted to go. I don't want to get too far into the history because it's actually pretty complicated, honestly, when you start reading about World War I, World War II. But just so people understand, there's not a lot of focus on Hungary when we talk about Hitler's influence in the Holocaust. Hungary had Europe's largest intact Jewish community pre-1944, which was just over or right at 800,000 Jews. 565,000 Jewish people were murdered during the Holocaust. And unfortunately, that included your grandparents. The labor service, which your father was able to get into, saved approximately about 42,000 people, which isolated them from deportations. So just kind of because there's not so much focus really so much on your grandparents about what happened with them with Auschwitz. I wanted to kind of ask you, could you explain to us, how did your grandparents get separated from your father and he was able to go into the labor service, which I guess eventually, it turned out to be a blessing for him.
Well, yeah, I couldn't say it better. In fact, the 40,000 you just mentioned, I didn't really realize that number. I was going to throw out the 21,000 people killed at the Danube in December, January, toward the end of the war for Hungary, 1943-44. But no, they came to my dad was conscripted into the forced labor camp, so he literally had to leave the house. He went with my mom to the train station, and with all his other buddies, they were hauled away to wherever they had to take them. Comran, I think, was the name of the city. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that's where they ended up, and before they went to God knows where. You're right. Being useful, being a young man and useful, saved his life in the end, even though it was a very difficult life. Same happened with the concentration camps. People that were young and useful did things like steal the jewelry or make clothing or repair the clothing and do these odd tasks that. In fact, my dad's father. By the way, my mom's grandfather was a rabbi. He also perished at Auschwitz, and then other people that are in the story like Zoli the clown, which was a childhood hero. My dad was humiliated and forced to undress and entertain the troops and the incoming prisoners, et cetera, et cetera. He was killed, and so humiliation is another subject we talk about a lot besides hope and determination. But 43, 44, like you said, was a real tough time. The rise of anti-Semitism was in the early 30s, but obviously was probably covert even in the 20s. The
Mm.
20s weren't so bad. My dad had a pretty good childhood. He was kind of a spoiled kid until he had to get to the forced labor camp. So, but because of his parents' discipline, he straightened up pretty quickly. He got more physically fit. He had no choice if he was going to survive. He had
Right.
to task. So, yeah, you're right. It saved his life and split second timing on these escapes, especially the second one, unreal. We're talking about seconds between the guards. And the night before, I don't want to skip too far, but the night before my dad's last escape, his risk tolerance was so high that he snuck into the medical center between security guards to check on his dossier to see what the Soviets had to say about him. And that's where we described not a real enemy. That's how they described my dad. He was politically immature, but he wouldn't buy into communism, nor would they buy into Nazism. And but they hated it. They loved Mother Hungary, but they hated the Nazis. They hated the communists. So in the end, the irony is my dad was a real enemy, and so was my mom, because you had two good people leave the country after the Hungarian Revolution. Whereas if the communists hadn't taken over in 44, 45, then they probably would have stayed. Like I said, I've probably been raised in Hungary.
How in the world did your father rebuild a life? I mean, when the war ended, when it's all said and done, the emotional scars, the brutality, the reality of escaping 4 times, the fact that every day could be your last day. Try not to starve to death. Hope you don't get shot. Don't know what the humiliations. How, when that ends, how in the world do you start from there again? And the emotional, the economic, how did he do that?
It is remarkable. I mean, that was most of my motivation in doing this, was thinking, how did he not have PTSD? How did he survive this without all of that? And I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if most of us could handle that, but he sure did. He just wanted to get into medical school, and he wanted to live in a free country. So one thing at a time. They had a 10% quota for. They were so short of doctors in Hungary because of all the genocide that they needed doctors. So 10% of the doctors, there was a quota, could be Jewish, the medical students. So my dad finally got in. Another miracle how he got into medical school. So, but I think that the focus there is what got him moving, got him motivated, doing what he loved. I'm sure he was scarred for life. I mean, he talked about his parents dying, and we visited Hungary and we went to his apartment, and it was a very emotional moment. And we went to a lot of grave sites and cemeteries. Of course, his parents weren't at any of them, but yeah, he was just tough and just a remarkable man. And if you knew him, he delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit area, by the way. So
Wow.
that's the punchline. That's called redemption. It doesn't bring back
Yeah.
the 6 million, and it doesn't bring back the 50 or 60 million that actually died in World War II. Not a lot of people know that. Never mind the millions of people that were persecuted or killed or tortured in Europe under the Soviet regime for many decades.
Right.
It does bring some life back, and my dad loved doing it. He would work till the day he died, and everybody in the hospital said hi to him when he went on rounds. He just loved what he's doing, and like I said, he wanted to do it in a free country. I mean, I guess he could have practiced OBGYN in Hungary under the Soviets, but
Mm.
there were too many. There were too many turncoats. There were too many Benedict Arnolds, people to try to get them to disparage communism and buy into it, and just to get points with the communists. And my dad he just wouldn't do it. So it's amazing how tough he was. My mind and it's just remarkable. And so now he's doubled down as my hero, not only as a doctor and a good one, but as a guy who, like you said, survives and just moves forward, and remarkably that he could do that.
Yeah, that's just absolutely and just to even I can't even really even think about the things that he went through. I'm for sure that he probably had PTSD. Definitely hit it well. It sounds like around you anyway. Um, I was curious a little bit about because you spoke um, about when you were actually going through and putting this together for a biography. Growing up, how much of that, the background and the story, the family history, was spoken about in the household? Were you kind of numb to that as a child? And then at some point, but when was the moment that it clicked of, wow, this is something that's actually extraordinary and I need to tell everybody about this?
Well, 2018 was when it clicked. I mean, that's when I started reading the story again. But we would have family fights. My dad would be tired. He'd be up all night delivering babies. And in the middle of family fights, he'd bring up how tough it was at the forced labor camp. And he'd talk about his parents being killed, not as emotional, more out of anger. I think the way they fought it off too. And like you said, the first half of my life, I mean, I was pre-med and then medical school. You're working, you're trying to you have a family, you're focused on other things. So I never really would have had time to write anyway, nor did I have an interest in writing. But
Right.
until 2018, and then I really got the zap. Um, and my mom and dad were both very intelligent people. They were both Holocaust educators. I think that helped curtail the stress and the PTSD by educating other people. They educated on history, but they were also well-rounded people. They museums and art and culture, the ballet, the theater, the opera, travel, education, all of that, and that rubbed off on me. And I don't have exactly the same interests, but I do like having a variety of interests and things to keep me sane for at the very least. Never mind, focused and just trying to enjoy whatever little time we have on this good planet Earth. So instead of protesting, I'm giving back to the community by doing this story and trying to educate people as my parents did. And they were also well respected in the Jewish community. They were well respected in the medical community. And they also had a diversity of friends: Asian, Russian, Hong Kong, Africa, India, Japan, Europe, of course, fellow Holocaust survivors in Michigan, my home state. And I like to do that. I like that. I think that's part of the answer in what's going on in the world, is try to engage and learn more about other people's culture
Mm.
rather than shun them, rather than ignore them or protest, or at the worst call for the death of a country or a race or religious or a religion. And that's what we're seeing now. And so back in high school, I was one of three Jews in my high school. It was about 40% African American. Never picked on for being Jewish. There was a lot of trash talking. There was a lot of bullying, but we left it on the football field. We left it on the baseball, the baseball and basketball court. It wasn't carried out. We weren't threatening each other because of race or religion. And in the end, there was a respect. If you were a good athlete, if you were a team player, for me, I was pretty smart, I guess, so that helped. And just being a nice person in general, that's what's going to get you forward. Um, the negotiations should be at the table. They should be in the classroom, not outside campuses calling for the death of people. I just don't think that's appropriate. And I'm not sure people care. And you could you could hate me because I'm Jewish, but I have nothing to do with Gaza. I mean, I didn't invent Gaza. They didn't. There were plenty of opportunities for Israel to get along with its neighboring Arab nations. As you know, it's about 1% of that whole Middle East section, and there are plenty of opportunities. There still are. I mean, they've made amends with Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon. And to some degree, there's still restrictions. There's still issues, but there's a lot of countries that Israel's made an effort to get along with, and I hope more of the same. These wars are so unfortunate. but that's what accelerates in general the peace process. But that's kind of ironic. Doesn't sound right, but
Right.
if there's one cell left, if there's one cell, then you can expect in 20 years, 25 years for this kind of thing to re-erupt. Because the conflicts go back to the Old Testament. I mean, Exodus, and my favorite book of the Old Testament. No surprise, right? It's about escapes and leaving a country where you're enslaved.
Right.
Sense, but that's my favorite story, Moses and Exodus. But the fight, the battle, and it's not just Jewish people versus the Philistines or the Muslims. It's also Christianity, a big, hundreds of years of persecution of Jewish people and Muslim, all because of religion or land, property. The Romans.
Mhm.
We can go on and on. Not to make up history, but the past, the animosity. Why can't we just all get along? There's 7 billion of us and rising. I mean, it's not gonna work if we keep fighting. There's only 15 million Jews at last I saw, 15 plus. And if it weren't for the Holocaust, it's estimated there would have been 41 million Jews on Earth now. And that's still a very, very small minority of people relative. 1.5 billion Christian, 1 billion Muslim, 1.5 billion Hindu slash Indian, and 1.5 billion Chinese slash Asian. That's probably 80% of the world population. If people wanted to decimate us as a whole, it wouldn't be that hard. If people wanted to gang up on us, it wouldn't be that difficult. Thank God we have 99% are normal. It's always the one guy that ruins it for everything. The Osama bin Laden, the Hitlers, the Himmlers, the whoever, Pol Pot. We can go on and on. Castro, Saddam Hussein. It's always the one guy that just rules it for 99% of us. We believe in family, religion, work. Any leisure we can get, any nice vacations, not destroy our neighbors, not fight with each other. I don't. So I'm trying to wrap my arms around the people that are like us, that care, and that live to educate about this kind of thing, and not put up with violence on campus and things like burning synagogues, anything like that. And we've seen a lot of even murder. The 65-year-old man in L.A., the president of the synagogue in Detroit, and it goes on and on. Canada's a nightmare. Australia has been. I don't know about now, but I've just seen horror stories, and of course Europe.
I was thinking about this on this vein of thought. I want to know more about your mother too, because I hear all that your father, but your mother's a Holocaust survivor herself. And how did they meet? Was that after the war? Was it during the encampments? Was it before the war? But before we get to your mother, I want to just jump on that vein. When I was watching all these protests and all these anti-Israel and anti-Jew, I mean, look, on October 7th, 2023, Hamas came in and butchered 1,200 people and gleefully and filmed it, and then drug 251 hostages into Gaza, of which we still are trying to get the last remaining remains. And Hamas still hasn't laid down their arms. At the same time, President Trump, we got to give him a little bit of credit. He started the Abraham Accords, trying to figure out a way to get peace with Israel, with some of the neighbors. And he's trying to expand that now. And you made a good point when you said, unfortunately, sometimes it takes war to bring peace. It's unfortunate, but we've seen it in history. After wars are over, people say, man, this wasn't worth it. And they try to figure out a way to survive until that one guy rises again. But when you were watching these college students, when you were watching from higher learning education in New York, Harvard and New York University and different Columbia and all these different places, how did you feel about that? How did you deal with that yourself when you were watching? And this was not just there; it was going on all over the world, and it was just like a week or two after the attack. I mean, there might have been a little bit of love for 7 days. That was about it. Everybody turned on Israel again. So how did you feel about that, Dr. Wolf?
Well, my slippery slope of fighting went from this to this. That's all of a sudden I had book presentations canceled for one thing, because people were feared for my security, for the synagogue security. That was a sad thing. More than one. It was horrifying. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. My parents would be mortified by seeing it. I thought they took way too long to squash all these protests. A pox on the deans and a pox on the presidents, the people that run these universities for letting that go for so long. Many were my alma mater, which was also horrifying, University of Michigan, where I never felt threatened. Yeah, probably a good percentage of my medical school class was Jewish, no doubt about it. Undergrad, Tufts, we had a lot of Jewish people on campus there. Yale, just horrifying. And in the end, most people would give their left, they would give anything to get into a school like Columbia or MIT or
Right.
Harvard.
Right.
And these people are squandering this great opportunity. And you don't have a right to keep me out of class. If I were a student there, I'd be burrowing through those people. Like, I'd go into the weight room like I normally do, get the hell out of my way, get the hell out of my professor's way. I have a right to learn. You don't have a right to kill me, let alone to stop me, to hinder my education. There's no way. So there's that thought. If I'm the parent of these kids, the lawsuits would be slapped on so quick that it'd be head spinning. I'm not sure how many have been. I imagine there've been a lot of lawsuits that have been started because of the thing, but that's something else to me. I would also call the governor of my state. I'd ask for military presence. That I never felt safer than in Israel, and I never, like you said, never felt more integration between the Judeo-Christian population and the Muslim too, because we did Muslim sites, et cetera, et cetera. But what I did like was the military presence, police and military presence. They're doing it in D.C. I think they should be doing it on campuses, and I think synagogues, churches, museums, libraries. Why can't we all have that privilege? And then I think that would curtail a lot of that of the uprisings. But it's horrifying, and and again, I feel the pain. I feel the interlocking of the story of Hamas and what happened to my parents. But it's still a different story. But the song remains the same. It's still anti-Semitism, covert or otherwise. So, and there are other things that the deans of the schools could have been better at powwowing. What are you guys doing to circumvent this? How can we help? They could have done a lot more, and also apologize to the Americans, apologize for, and take accountability for taking too long to take care of the problems. And once they do, if and when they do all that and get things settled, then I guess they could apply for federal grants and federal money. But we shouldn't be paying our tax dollars to universities that support genocide and support the destruction of Israel or any other place.
Right. I agree with you 1,000%.
America too. I mean, it's the same people. It's. I met a lady who she got a divorce. Her ex-husband is Russian, and she says the guy hates this country. So then why the heck doesn't
Why are you here? Yeah,
why are you here? Move back to Russia. Go fight in Ukraine for 3 years. See how you like it. If you survive that long, good luck with that. I mean, so it's sad to hear things like that because it's not just Palestinian sympathizers and not just Gaza sympathizers. There's other people out there. We've got white supremacists and skinheads, and it's sad. It's ridiculous.
Well, actually, this is a question. So, Dr. Will, I think you're the best person to actually answer this question. So I've asked Pastor this before, and he has a different take on it, which is, I mean, Pastor, you can probably jump in and
well, I don't know the question yet.
Well, yeah, some context for it. But like you were mentioning with the skinhead, so I live in Washington State right now. So when I moved here from Virginia. Okay, so it's like totally different different ways of thinking across the country. But I see an old restaurant that was closed up, and they gated it off, and it must have come from when all of that protesting and ridiculousness was going on. And we talked about it on a podcast a couple weeks ago. What is like this obsession of free Palestine for people that have never even been in that part of the country or part of the world and probably never will be? But my question for you is, why is there persecution of Jewish people? What is the point? Like, ultimately, is it about their religion, the region of the world that they're in, the land that they occupy, natural resources, wealth? What is it?
Well, you answered your own question because those are the words I would use. I mean, maybe it's jealousy. Maybe it's just some people will just useful idiots. I've heard that term. You recruit people that have nothing better to do than get out and protest. I mean, that's something else. People that just have anger, I suppose. But you're right. They don't know They don't know the history. We got to go back to 48 for modern Israeli history. But like I said, we got to go back thousands of years too.
Right.
I wish I knew the answer. I'm trying to get my arms around it. it's funny you mentioned Washington because my co-author Janet, and she's in Washington State too. So,
Mm.
and she's a liberal lady, but she can't stand what's going on in the world too. So she helped me do this book for probably a lot less than she would have otherwise, knowing that what we're talking about is important. So, and then Virginia, you talk about Virginia. I have a friend who's chief of surgery in Kalamazoo. He left Charlottesville, Virginia, because of the protests that they had there, and that was
Mm-hmm.
way
Yep.
before the attack. So, yeah, it's the covert anti-Semitism. Is what about January 6th when they took over the Capitol? I mean, that was just horrific. I mean, it's one thing to want a president to win an election. It's another thing to threaten people and have Nazi paraphernalia on and swastikas and that. And a lot of people they don't even know the history of World War II probably. And
Yeah, I just don't get it.
people that deny World War. A lot of people denied 9/11, 9/11, and I'll tell you what. Americans were targeted 9/11. Those were terrorist attacks, and Christians died, Jewish people, Asians, African Americans, Muslim. The people that was an attack against America, and that's probably the last time we were bonded as a nation. Maybe COVID after the coronavirus for about 10 minutes, and of course World War II after Pearl Harbor. That was but Korea, the support for Korea, Vietnam, these. Unless a war is a 6-day war, that it comes and goes quickly. It just the pain lingers on. So I don't know. I wish I could wrap but ignorance is definitely part of it. Jealousy, just the difference of religion, people that just don't know how to accept education at home. Education starts at home. I'm sure hate, a lot of people that have prejudices and hate, it was taught to them, by their,
Right.
by their brothers, sisters, friends, who knows. I was at a Camp Judea in Texas last week, and a guy comes up to me and says, I've got a 10-year-old, and he had to endure an anti-Semitic remark and some anti-Semitic gestures from one of his classmates. And what do I tell him about that? I said, well, you got to tell this teacher, you got to tell the principal, you got to let his parents know, and you got to bring them all in. And those are the kids that need the education. Another one are prisoners, people that are convicted of hate crimes. I think those would be people that should read this book, my book, and others like it. And if they become movies like Schindler's List, they should have X number, like community hours, but instead of being educated about what hatred really is, or at least this form of it, especially since Jews have been a scapegoat many times when things aren't always so perfect. And you have other scapegoats. That's the sad thing too. The Asians were scapegoats after coronavirus, and the Muslims, Islamophobia was prominent after the 9/11, and that's wrong too.
Okay, this is great. This is just a great interview, and your book has got to be amazing. I want to read it.
I hope you enjoy it. And please, feedback welcome. I mean,
Yep.
I can't fight anti-Semitism alone. I got to stress that point. I need an army of people to help with education.
Let me ask you about your mother. How did she survived? Was she in a different camp? Did they meet before the Holocaust? Was it during the Holocaust? Was it after the Holocaust? Tell us about your mother.
That's a great question. Not everybody asks me. So my mom, as much as she educated, she didn't document her life story as much as my dad. Maybe 10 pages, 20 pages. So I read it over, and what she told me, basically, she was hiding. My mom was 11 years younger than my dad, so she was just, we'll call her 10 years old. They were both May birthdays, so she was in hiding with her mom, grandparents, uncle, different places, out on the farm in Budapest. Mostly just hiding in fear every day, not knowing, just like Anne Frank did, but at different places. But they survived just by hiding. So less adventurous World War II for my mom, but certainly when they left it in '56, that was enough adventure for her. But they met once. Her mom or her aunt, a relative of hers, when she was a really young girl, was in the hospital that my dad was working at. And he didn't think much. He didn't think much of her at the time. Actually, that was the truth. And but years later, when my dad was a resident, my mom was a med student. That's where they met, and I think they were fixed up by my mom's friends, and it was fate after that. So they fell in love and got married in 1953. Illegal Jewish wedding. Amazing chapter about that. The host got hauled off for 11 to 13 months and. By the Soviets and tortured because Jews were not allowed to have religious weddings. So there was that story. So 53, they got married in January 53, and happily ever after until my dad passed away. So I think they would have stayed married all their lives. But So it was through the medical center. My mom was a student, but he did meet her. I think she was in too for a thyroid issue once, and I'm not sure the details of that, but she had some thyroid problems, so she was in. But my dad, it was just a brief encounter, both for on those occasions until they went out on a date and were serious about their careers and well into the Soviet era. So 1949 or 50. Someone asked me when they actually the date that they met or something like that, and I it's a little shaky. I can't remember everything, that's for sure. But the way they survived, the way they stayed quiet about the communist life and focused on their work, it was a real secret. It wasn't really a life,
Yeah.
It wasn't really a life. It was just restraint and persecution. It's just wasn't for them.
I and the Americans don't get we're horrible in our schools in teaching on history. They don't understand what the Nazis did. They don't understand communism and under Stalin, or the Brezhnev, or even if you want to go all the way back, they don't even know. So when they hear that term, they're like, oh well, it's a new ideology. And it's made and socialism and communism are kissing cousins basically, and it's a step on. We're watching this develop in New York City right now.
It's just going to bring that up. So, yep.
Yeah. So would you just tell me? Okay, so your parents were living and working as doctors or in med school, and living under a communist regime, which at any time, I've interviewed guys that survived, a doctor who survived Fidel Castro, worked as a doctor there until finally one day he was just targeted to say he was anti-Castro, and he had to get on a raft and float in the ocean for 4 days to get away. He knew they was going to kill him for nothing. He never did anything. So how in the world, how do you feel about Mondami and this whole situation in New York? I mean, New York, there's 8 million Jews in New York. There's, I think, 7 million in Israel. How in the world did this guy get elected?
Well, I don't know if there's that many, but there is a significant Jewish population in New York. So I expect them to come down to our beautiful state of Florida anytime now, just like they did with the COVID. Don't be surprised if there's a big diaspora, as the word would be, or exodus. I'm not real political. I don't know all the details except what I've read and seen on the news and that I picked up here and there, some on social media. But it's frightening, and it's something to be watched very closely. To see what happens. Less police protection. I think New York needs more. We already talked about that. Any type of protection. It's a dangerous city in some areas, and not just New York, Detroit, Chicago, Miami. L.A. It's just like in D.C. I pray for these people. I hope this guy engages the Jewish population, because that's what he needs to do. If you want support in office, then you have to support the people, because in the end, they're the ones who are working for the people, right? I mean, let's not forget that. We, the people, same with our president, same with our governor. The Florida governor, I think he cleaned up things pretty well. Not a different guy, but he's not Jewish. But he did go to Israel though with our county commissioner, whose mom lives in my community, so which is kind of cool. I've met him a couple times. Nice guy. I wish I could get him to support the book. He's telling me about doing coronary artery screening, and I'm like, I'm a doctor, I get it. I'm a radiologist, I know what that is. But how about giving me let's get a program going, about. And they have had some programs about anti-Semitism. And the lady that directs this place, she knows me, and I've called her and we reached out. And they have this annual huge Holocaust survivor program, and they fill the house. And I would fit right into one of those if the interest is there. The problem is, it's not a problem. They want first generation survivors in general, like Dallas. You call Dallas, they say, well, we want local first generation survivors, but there aren't many left. And
right.
And there's a few of us, just a nice handful of us that are trying to keep the stories going. But who knows, in 50 or 100 years, we're not talking about the Civil War anymore. We're not talking about World War I, the Revolutionary War, not even Korea and Vietnam anymore. So, the Holocaust is doomed to be forgotten, just like, the Jews building the Colosseum in Rome, or slave labor there and in Egypt, so.
Right. Well, so Dr. Wolf, I know that you're doing your part and part of your mission, and doing this podcast as well as get the awareness out for this book. I think you give at least 10% of the proceeds for each book to, I forgot which fund it is that you give that to.
The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C., the mothership, I call it. So
Yeah. Okay.
that's for my mom and dad, but that's my way to give back to the community. So it's a win-win. You know, I'm educating this way, and 10% of the book proceeds go to the Holocaust Museum. And I was fortunate enough to do four-day book signings, and we sold a lot of books. But more importantly, and this is what they stressed, is talking about genocide, teaching the kids, teaching the visitors.
Hmm.
And that was amazing. I could do that every day. I just sit there and sign their books, and you have any questions for me? Let's shoot. One guy was from Australia. He said anti-Semitism wasn't a problem, in Australia, and that was right around the time of the attacks. But from what I've seen, it's a problem. Synagogues get cooked and things like that. People from all over the country, Canada, England, Europe, Germany, fantastic experience. So yes, it was nice to be able to sign there. I've done a few other programs at other Holocaust museums. I wish I could do them all. Believe me, I'm trying. It takes time. I'm doing this all alone. I do have an office manager, but it's a very fickle and busy business trying to write and sell a book, let alone sell a message. You know, and especially to
Right.
people like you. I don't have to sell the message about hating anti-Semitism to you, but what I do have to say is, help me network. And this is what, just having me on a podcast is a great way to go. I mean, it's
Right.
great, especially if you have a good following. Few people buy the books. I get maybe a phone call, somebody saying, I'd like to do a podcast with you, or would you like to come to our town and do a live presentation? I would love that. It's I don't say no to anything unless I'm ill or, if I'm in financial straits. And thank God that's not the case right now.
I know that your book is also carried in multiple Holocaust museums, I think internationally as well. But I think the big question I want from you, because I mean, the inspiration really comes from your parents and your grandparents. What message would your parents want people to hear now?
Okay, well, I'm going to mix it in with my message and
Yeah.
how good we have it in this country. Like, even if you don't like who got elected in New York or in the White House, you had a chance to vote. We had a chance to vote. We had a chance to choose. We can still practice religion. You can go to the synagogue, you can go to the church, you can go to the mosque and practice religion without harassment most of the time. Please realize that we're slow down on life, so enjoy what we have a little bit. If you don't like what you're doing as work, for example, go part-time or change vectors, change careers. It's never too late to do the right thing. It's another lesson. Give back to the community, spend more time with your family. If you're bored, write a book, write a poem, write an opera, travel, go to a ball game or a concert. I mean, there's so many ways of being constructive. Don't be destructive, be constructive. What else? I said give back to the community. What happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. I mean, could it be a bad neighbor, a bad business deal, bad local government, federal government, foreign government, natural disaster, and you could find yourself without a place to live and on the run, and not knowing where your next meal's coming. I feel bad for the homeless. That's another problem we have in Florida, is the homelessness. With success and overpopulation breeds homelessness and crime, and it's a problem that I don't. It's not my corner. Mine is anti-Semitism. There's a lot of other problems, of course, but I can't imagine having to live like that in the cold, the heat, the rain, the thunder showers. I mean, and then even worse up north, the freezing temperatures. So that could happen to anybody, and it's not knowing where your next work is going to come from. So people need to realize that and be grateful for most of us that we have what we have, and our only time, and the only time is our only commodity is time. Gold, silver, stocks, crypto, all that stuff. They're cyclical, but they're not. Our only commodity is time. So make the most out of it. Be a team player. There's no substitute for experience. And like I said, give back to the community. Do the right thing, and just you don't have to love me, but understand me. Embrace our different cultures and be tolerant. A friend of mine hates that word tolerance. It should be more peace and love rather than tolerance. It sounds like, well, are you just putting up with somebody? Yeah,
Just deal with it. Yeah.
yeah, not the best word, but
Yeah.
it is a word that we have to use sometimes. It's a start.
hmm
I love the fact that your book is called "Not a Real Enemy: The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom," and the fact that it's coming personally from the stories of your father, your mother, your grandparents, and you, and what it means and how it's affected you and the Jewish community. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, I think 3 or 4 times. It's one of the most moving. Nobody speaks. It's one of the most incredible things in the world when you're going through that. You'll be in there with 1,000 people, and you could hear a pin drop as everyone's slowly working their way through, seeing the pictures of, and the propaganda and what reading the diaries and seeing the shoes of the children, and you feel that, you real that, you say, how can humanity have such evil among it? And my perspective is that the Jewish people are hated because they're God's chosen people. And the enemy, Lucifer, of course, hates God. And he's going to hate anybody that would be representing God, or God's children. And so being a Christian pastor, I embrace and my wife and all my kids are part Jewish. I'm the only one that's the wild Irishman. I just want to be, I kid around with the rabbis when I go to Israel. I spoke at the Knesset. I met Schindler's granddaughter, Rosemary Schindler.
Huh?
Spoke actually in an event with her at the Knesset. And here's what I always say to them. Guys, the kid, is there any way I can get a righteous tree? I guess if they'll plant a tree if you're a righteous Gentile. I said, I'm just trying to get a tree here in the Holy Land.
Good for you.
Yeah, I love all the Jewish people, and
you bring up a couple other good points. One is I've already forgotten one, but Holocaust Museum. Hungary is kind of underrepresented in the Yad Vashem.
Right.
And I agree with you. I've been to many of these museums. It's hard to believe I would be doing, like 8 years ago, you'd say this guy, because I had a Holocaust fatigue or Holocaust burnout. But I can't even go in those trains. I can't even, I can barely look at them, but for me to step into one of those, I can't even do that. People say, well, maybe you want to go to Auschwitz and visit. I don't know if I can do that. I'm not sure, even though I'm writing about it. And I've been to Israel like you, not as many times, but I'd go back in a heartbeat. Like I said, never felt safer. I didn't want to come back to beautiful Florida. I mean, it's so. And another thing, chosen people. I don't really like that expression, because who's to say who's right and wrong? Maybe we're all right. I mean, I don't know what the answer is there, but that can fuel the fire. I would, potentially, if I said, well, we're the chosen people and I'm sticking my chest out, that can actually fuel it.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, thank you for your support of Israel. They say that all Jewish people should make Aliyah, all Jewish people should visit Israel, but I say everybody should visit Israel. That is an eye opener, and that is, you can find very few countries that are going to get you charged up like a country like Israel.
Amen.
Wow. Well, in closing, I just want to say, Dr. Wolf, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your parents' incredible story. Not a Real Enemy reminds us that even in the darkest times, courage, faith, and the will to survive can overcome unimaginable evil. For our listeners, you can learn more at robertjwolfmd.com and find Not a Real Enemy on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at Holocaust museums across the country. Dr. Wolf, it's been an honor having you join us today, and thank you for continuing your parents' mission to educate, inspire, and remind the world to never forget. God bless you.
God bless, and thanks, guys. Appreciate the time. Appreciate meeting you. Stay in touch.
Yes, we'll stay in touch with you. God bless you.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Paul Begley Podcast. New episodes will be released every Tuesday on all major podcast streaming platforms. For a video recording of this episode, you can watch and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Paul Begley Podcast. Hey, guys, we want you to connect with us. Follow us on X and Twitter at Paul Begley Pod. We'd love to hear your questions you want us to answer on the show. For additional Paul Begley content, go to our website at paulbegleyprophecy.org. If you've thought about it, we'll talk about it. Paul Begley Podcast.